Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Dr. Anastasia Bard, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Sherray. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you are joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any question for our guest. Today's guest will be introduced by Professor Victor Fett.
Thank you, Nara, and it is my honor to welcome to our 139th weekly podcast Anastasia Bard from New Jersey, USA, and will tell us about her nonprofit group Helping Hands for Ukraine, to which we urge you to donate. And her story is very indicative of what is going on in the last almost 3 years with Ukraine and the United States. Anastasia was born in Kyiv in Ukraine, immigrated to the United States as 14, worked for many years as TV journalist, married with 2 kids, and her husband is also from Ukraine, from Kharkiv. Since the full-scale war in Ukraine began, the whole family became very active in their help. Please, Anastasia, the microphone is yours.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here and humbling to be here, and unfortunate that we're still talking about the ongoing aggression, ongoing war in Ukraine. And our story of our family is not in any way unique. I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people across the United States that are trying to help. So I'll do the best that I can to be clear in telling how we have begun and share some videos just and photos so that you can see a little bit of what we have gone through, and maybe something new will come up, maybe something will be learned, but maybe something will be interesting too. So my husband and I, as I mentioned, are both born in Ukraine. When the war began, it was a complete shock because we are initially Russian speakers at home. We went to many demonstrations to support. We have daughters who are now 14 and 17, and it's a little overwhelming to me to think they were so little when it began. Like, this is the first demonstration they went to in front of the Russian consulate in New York City. And my dad lives in Kyiv now. I have a lot of relatives in Ukraine, and they are thinking about their grandpa. And I'm sure it's a little overwhelming for them still because they're so involved. And after the first initial weeks of confusion, you can say, of how best to help, we started urging our friends to say, join us in our efforts. And these are examples of the first weeks of when boxes just arrived by hundreds in our home, in our living room. And this is full of whether it's medical gear or boots, hats. It was winter. We packed in our garage. My husband's car no longer fits anywhere in the garage because we're always packing something. So this is my older daughter, Elizabeth, and my husband, Konstantin. And at first, it was just overwhelming number of donations. We were trying to figure out what is best. There was a lot of thermal gear, the medical kits, just Amazon drivers know our neighborhood intimately. My daughters are packing at all hours of the night. One of them is actually in her pajamas here. And very early on, through friends and relatives in Ukraine, we made contacts directly with doctors and medics. So because I was born in Ukraine and I've traveled there many times, we know how important it is to deal with people directly instead of big warehouses or volunteers. So everything was very accountable to me personally that I could vouch for. So this is a maternity ward in Kharkiv, in a relatively modest area of Kharkiv. So it's not like a center clinic that gets all kinds of help. And they were missing a neonatal unit. So when you hear things like that, emotionally, just very hard to not get involved, not take it personally. So we raised money with help of local friends, and $3,000 machine was delivered. They sent pictures. Then all of the things we had sent for, we received photos of, right? And I post on my personal social media, and we only sent to people who are already serving. So you kind of hope that it makes very direct, immediate impact. So this was a very big project where we raised money for 50 medical kits. And we learned as we went, right? What are the best medical kits? What should they contain? What kind of things do they need? I mean, there's 2 plastic bags there, and they actually contain ear muffler or ear plugs, right? Because unfortunately, that was a big thing that was missing. Ukraine was still getting on the way to being prepared and having all that it needs. We spend incredible amount of money on shipments, right? So this is one of the first checks, and to this day I write numbers of shipments on the checks. Shipment number 58 is going out on Tuesday. So it's every week it's about $500 to $900 that we need to spend to ship the aid that either is donated or something that we purchase. And one of the ways of buying some of the things needed, and one of them was uniforms, and they all used. Almost nothing was new because we just didn't have the money to buy anything new. We organized concerts. So this is not the first concert, but one of the bigger ones in the summer, about 6 months after the war has begun. And we're very blessed with incredible people we've met. I actually didn't know any of them before the war. I met them at another charity concert in New York City, came up to the guy in the yellow t-shirt, his name is Dmitro, and I said, would you guys come out to New Jersey? We can organize a concert. And they said yes, and they've been coming ever since. Actually, we're going to have another concert in February to mark 3 years since the war has begun, and I just couldn't be more grateful. My own daughter is the one in the blue t-shirt with the Ukrainian motif, and our friend's daughter, they all helped during the events. We started catering and cooking all the food ourselves because that just was a way of saving money. So the kids collect the money from the people who arrived. And again, I never thought I needed a big house. My husband wanted one, but it turns out it's great for concerts. When I bought the house with my family, I wasn't planning on ever organizing big events, but now we're so good, like where you see the guys on the screen, that's where the couch normally is. And we moved the furniture out, and we fit 60 people, sometimes a little more. Everyone who performed, who did sound, who moved furniture, everyone is a volunteer. No one ever made any money. So that's again is Dmitro and his friend Ilya, incredibly talented musicians. We've just done the best we can. It's all grassroots. And of course, we organized friends around it. This is my younger daughter, Natalie, in glasses, and her friends from a Girl Scouts troop. And they've been packing aid every year, right here, a presence for nurses and doctors in that maternity ward that I showed you in the beginning. So I guess I'm just saying that everything we do is very personal. We don't try to make huge events we can't handle. We're trying to do smaller projects. This is Natalie opening up Amazon boxes with prenatal vitamins. And here is a picture of one of the young moms. This is 1 year into the war, who has received those vitamins. And the money came from the money I donated. I teach yoga in addition to doing other projects. So all the money from yoga went into prenatal vitamins for these new moms. And it's just a way to psychologically support, to help. We've packed presents for both new moms as well as nurses in that maternity ward. And I know that they just help for people in Ukraine to know that we're not forgetting, like the work never stops. My husband has a full-time job. I work 2 jobs, plus I'm a mom, but we are very involved. And an incredible lady, her name is Elena, found a way to get access to donated uniforms. So these are uniforms we packed and sent, and these doctors and nurses are wearing them gratefully. And the hardest part of the job But also the most important one is the connection with people who serve. So this young lady, she's actually a pediatrician who volunteered to start serving in the war. Her code name is Alaska. She was injured and she's currently during a rehabilitation trying to get better. And they have been one of our main contacts, her and two other ladies. This is Alaska getting the card I wrote. These are the cards on my desk with just warm socks. There's a sketchbook there because she's also a graphic artist. She's a wonderful violinist. I had the incredible pleasure of meeting her in the hospital where she's going through rehabilitation in Kyiv just recently. So connections like this, people you talk to for 2+ years, and then suddenly you meet them, it's incredible. This is again Alaska and her friend Yana. Yana is also a dear friend now. She's a lawyer from Kharkiv, and she also volunteered and served in the army for 2.5 years. And John, you may recognize the face. The lady on our left is Julia. She's a medic. She's been volunteering in the army and serving in the army since 2014, an incredible human. She's a fashion designer and also a very advanced medic at this point, so she trains others. And sadly, the gentleman on her left and our right is no longer with us. So getting these pictures and then knowing the stories, as unfortunately they change, that's a huge part of what I do, because I need to understand what to send, how quickly to send. Can we save money on shipping it via sea, or is this so urgent we need to ship ASAP? All of these small things actually add up to really huge projects. Packing in the cold garage is not easy. We often wear our jackets. So this is my husband and me. This is our, what used to be a pool table. It's always full of supplies. I have thermal gear on it right now, and the bags with blue, I guess you can say, table covers that you see on the screen. All of this is donated by local New Jersey doctors. They either drop off at our house or we pick up and we sort. And the amazing thing is that in these bundles, there's discarded surgical supplies that would be incinerated or no longer needed in New Jersey, in the United States. And we sort them by departments, who needs what. Sometimes there's things for oncology, sometimes for maternity wards, sometimes for cardiology. So I actually have a friend doctor in Ukraine to whom I send pictures, and I say, what box do I put this in? And we spend at least 2 hours whenever there is a large donation, just sorting and sorting. But then I know when the aid gets there, it gets to the right place. This was another huge project. We raised a lot of money from the concerts to buy toe warmers, hand warmers, and what was most needed, actually, it's not clearly seen on this picture, but there's such thing called body warmers. It's a much larger packet that is activated, and it keeps your whole body warm for almost 12 hours. Invaluable for people trying to stay warm, just like we're trying to stay warm in our garage. But it's much easier for us, right? There are no electricity outages or anything else that unfortunately people deal with Ukraine. So that's our charity. It's not a big charity. It was all grassroots. I couldn't wait to, in a way, stop, because there's so many other things in our lives going on. I'm always trying to balance things with, New Jersey life. I have chicken soup simmering on my stove right now because I know I have to feed the kids when they come home. But about 6 months ago in May, we had decided to open an official charity, which people were urging us to do for a while, and I was kind of avoiding it because I knew there'll be a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more work to do that I didn't have time for. But it's getting harder to raise money. Being an official 501(c)(3) does give you certain legitimacy, right? Even though nothing really changed in our work other than more accounting paperwork. But it made projects possible. And this is a gentleman I just met in Kharkiv. His name is Zhenya. He's holding a bag that's worth it. Well, this one bag is probably worth about $1,000, but we send 3 like this, right? $3,000 of tourniquets. something that allows you, allows a medic, allows a soldier himself to stop the bleeding. So one tourniquet is $23, right? I know how much everything costs. I buy it myself. I negotiate with each company. We're always trying to find new ways to save money. These are my beautiful daughters and Jacob, our family friend. They started packing and helping probably about a year ago. So every Saturday or every other Saturday, teenagers come to our garage and we sort and pack together. Another friend donated this banner. We literally don't spend money on anything. My husband created a beautiful website for free. I do all the public relations for free, obviously. Friends donate business cards, banners. Our accountant is donating her services. We have free representation from lawyers, the friends, again, of the family. So we've been very lucky not to spend money on any bureaucracy that we could avoid, because we have so many people that were rallied around, and it really became a special project that's now no longer a project. It's just the way to live. And of course, incredible friends help. This is Luba. Her name means love in Ukrainian. And she spends, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 hours each week creating beautiful needlepoint creations. Her mom lives in Ukraine. She's a Ridgewood mom, like I am. She's my neighbor 10 minutes away. And Luba sells at different street fairs, fall festivals, whatever she makes, and donates all the money to the charity. So just last week alone, she brought $1,000 from what she was able to sell. So when you have friends like that who support the kind of things we're trying to do, when you do it together, these are some other volunteers, our dog that climbed on the boxes, it really makes impossible possible. So that's the story of what we've been doing the last 2.5 years. And one of the things that I made a decision to do early in the summer is to go to Ukraine because, well, first of all, my dad lives in Kyiv, and I didn't know fully how well his health was. I kept asking. I was like, Dad, how are you? How are you feeling? Great. Everything's good. Normal. That's a word Ukrainians use a lot. They don't complain. They're all pretty strong. They use the word norm. All good. 2 pluses. Acknowledged. But it wasn't enough. Like, I was sensing something is going on. So even though I fully understand that places in Ukraine are not, most places in Ukraine are not safe. And as I found out, pretty much no place in Ukraine is safe, unfortunately. I decided to go. So my husband's like, should I go with you? I'm like, no, you can't. Someone has to stay with the kids, right? So if God forbid something happens, someone's home. So I bought the tickets, and it just so happened, unfortunately, it wasn't planned. I wish I was that insightful, that I arrived in Kyiv on the actual Independence Day of Ukraine. So imagine arriving in the country on July 4th. It was very special. So I'm going to share some more pictures now so you can see a little bit about the trip to Ukraine. And I've been good. I haven't cried. Let's hope it stays. So this is my picture in New Jersey or New York airport. This is JFK. I'm on my way. And after a night in Warsaw, I took a train. This is really an awesome direct train from Warsaw to Kyiv. So from capital to capital, very convenient, 16 hours, considering it's 16 hours. I had splurged on a private berth, which is not that expensive by American standards, but actually in a small compartment like this, 3 people fit. So it's this backing becomes the second level, and that's the third. So I think if you have 3 people traveling in one compartment, that may be a little tricky. And you can see here 2 bags that I'm carrying, a suitcase full of tourniquets. Thank you, sunflower seeds, John. It's incredible what you guys were able to do. And the second bag is my stuff. And this is probably the worst bag in the world, as I found out. The train is an old Soviet train. It does say Kyiv, Warsaw, right? But it goes in both directions. I was very lucky to have good neighbors, quiet ride. I got to do customs of both countries relatively quickly. There's a lot of families traveling between Poland and Ukraine. Some people are visiting family. That was a German couple right next to me. So there's a lot of different people who are traveling. Uh, if you are born in Eastern Europe, you'll recognize a similar shaped tea glass. That was a throwback to my childhood. That's the kind of tea, the kind of holders you had used when you traveled on trains overnight. And as a journalist, I worked in international news for 20 years. So as a journalist, I was very curious about pretty much everything. And I took pictures. So without trying to do it sneakily, but also safely. So that's the Polish um, uh, border as we're crossing. And about an hour later, after the Polish border, we crossed the Ukrainian border. So I was trying to distract myself with lots of reading. The Ukrainian border took about half an hour, no issues. They took my passport, they brought it back, and I got my stamp of me arriving. It was a little after midnight, the 24th. And then finally, I was near Kyiv. So that's the next day. My train was arriving at noon. I was feeling a little overwhelmed. It was very special. It was beautiful weather. So that's just a neighborhood near the train station. And that's my dad. His name is Anatoly. He's 72 years old. And I have a lot of Ukrainian American t-shirts that I wore on the whole trip. So this is the first moment I've seen my dad in 5 years. Because of COVID and then the war, they kind of overlapped a little bit. We never got a chance to see each other in between. So I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for this trip, even though it was tricky. So after lunch, we went to see the city center. My dad lives what would be, if you're familiar with New York City, in like Brooklyn area of New York. It's still, I should say of Kyiv. So he lives a little further away from the center. You have to take a couple of train stops. And this is the very center. It's like the Broadway of Kyiv. And because it was Independence Day, it was one of those strange moments where will there be aggression? Will there be an attack? So there were people certainly on the streets, but it wasn't huge crowds. It was relatively quiet. It was beautiful to see Kyiv to be clean. It didn't look bombed in the areas where we were. It didn't look devastated. The one huge difference, there was a lot of soldiers in uniforms. I've never seen that many soldiers in non-war zone, because as a journalist, I've traveled to war zones, but in peaceful cities, that for me, what Kyiv always was, it was a peaceful Ukrainian city, the place where I'm born. I've never seen soldiers on the street, policemen, yes, but you could see a lot of people in fatigues and camouflage. And this is the main square. It says, I love Ukraine. And right next to it, you can see in the corner here, there is this field with Ukrainian flags. So a lot of the photographs there are of people who have lost their lives defending their country. There are a lot of flags that represent different places. You can see a Canadian flag probably. There's smaller Americans in other places. There was a photograph of a gentleman from New Jersey, actually, who volunteered to help Ukraine. So that was pretty strong emotions as I'm seeing the city of my birth in a very different state. Like this is one of the historical figures from Ukrainian history, Princess Olga, and she's wearing a flag jacket, right? It says, we're going to defend Ukraine. Right next to the foreign ministry in one of the main churches, there was an exhibition of these cars. These are armored cars that were destroyed in the fighting. And the building you see behind this particular, I guess maybe that's a tank, That's the foreign ministry. So I'm sure it was designed as you bring foreign guests to find this unavoidable to ignore. And pictures along the very long wall of the famous church there showed all the fallen defenders of Ukraine. This is from 2014, right? So this is when the first action had begun in Donetsk in the east. And this is the famous Mikhailovsky Church. It was rebuilt after it was destroyed last century. And I went to many churches because I love ancient frescoes. And again, anywhere you go, you see military fatigues. There were a lot of different people who were serving. Another moving moment was seeing an exhibition of weapons that were used in different attacks on Ukrainian cities. So it's hard to read here, but the words on top say the name of the city. And the markers below show how many people had died because of this particular weapon. So when I was reading these names of these cities, I was recognizing the names where I sent packages. So Kurakhove is a small village in the east, and one of the scouts, one of the girls that we help and we send aid to, she served in that small village. Another word here is Izum, right? Another very famous city that had a very hard battle, and lots of people have fallen. So seeing these different weapons, different examples of destruction, that was pretty hard. And also nearby was an exhibition of the kind of weapons Ukrainian army see what drones look like. I'm quite far from the military side of things. We focus on humanitarian aid, but it was just interesting to see how modernized the Ukrainian army is now, largely thanks to the help that it received from the United States and many other partners. There was a very interesting photograph of well, thank God I can read it here, unmanned boat. This is what's being used of in the Black Sea to drown Russian warships. So again, that's just part of the life in Ukraine now, that people are a lot more aware of what's being used by the military. And the worst part, of course, is seeing buildings that are either famous or important with windows that are either blocked or damaged or destroyed, seeing famous monuments which are covered for safety, right? Because if there is an attack, if there is a rocket, it would be damaged. So this is probably the most famous monument for famous Ukrainian poet Shevchenko. It stands right across from the university, and we can't see it now. Terrible that this happens. And after 2 peaceful days in Kyiv, that next day there was a siren, my first siren in Ukraine. Honestly, it wasn't scary. It was strange, right? It was, the lights were on. You couldn't probably hear it very well. The sound was pretty low in my window as well, but it just reminded me, oh, okay, those 2 beautiful days, those are the exception. And for the next, how many did I spend? For the next 8, there were bombing sirens and something going on every single day, and alerts, messages. Again, there's just shots from around the city. This is another famous monument for Saint Volodymyr, another prince who had baptized the Kievan Rus a long time ago, 1500 years ago. This is the main river in Kiev, Dnieper. It separates the city into left and right sort of sections. And one of my friends was telling me of his interaction with some generals who came to train Ukrainian military. So there were these NATO commanders saying, well, this left side on our right, this is the part that they thought Ukrainians could not hold on to, that the Russians would be able to attack Kyiv and take this part of the city. And the right side, they would probably be able to hold on. Well, obviously, that NATO prediction was wrong. The Ukrainians have held on to for a lot more that was expected, thanks to a lot of very heroic people. And everywhere you went, you kind of saw these reminders that there is war. It's not peaceful life, right? It may be beautiful weather, but there's something always going on. So there was barbed wire around stadiums. You couldn't access certain areas that I remembered from my childhood. That's one of the stadiums. Ukraine's hugely into soccer.
So around 5:30 this morning, I heard sirens at the window
so
and
I
started
walking
reading messages
on the street, and there was just a big alert, and I was in the middle of my morning walk, and I didn't know what to do. Am I supposed to go back? Am I supposed to run into the subway? Am I supposed to go home and have breakfast? This is the absurd life of a tourist, if I can call myself that, in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, people communicate by checking messages on a system called Telegram. Telegram allows you to sign up for different message services. Like this one has 2.5 million subscribers. And what it does, when there is an alert, you get messages, a rocket heading for this town, 2 rockets heading for that town. And I'm like, oh, how useful. So this way you know when to worry or not. But I didn't realize after a few days, what dawned on me is that you're constantly on edge. You're constantly
I've been out
worried about what message is coming next. So I was out on this 40-minute walk, and just within 40 minutes, I was starting to shake, not from fear, but just from, again, trying to understand all these rockets flying. Are they for me? Are they for my dad? Are they for my friends in another town? It was a little disconcerting, to say the least. The power didn't cut out yet, but the one thing that we deal with in Ukraine is that you're afraid to take elevators because you don't know when it might happen. Usually there's outages are scheduled, they're announced, but you never know. It might come a few minutes early, it might come a few minutes late. So it's safer to take the stairs. I was lucky. My dad's building is only 6 floors, and I had to walk only 5. Plus, I think exercise is great for you. But there are many people who live on 10th or 15th floor, and it wasn't something that's always accessible to every age group. Let's call it that. So, for me, taking the stairs became very much a habit. And this, I'm going to try to share the sound.
right
this
now,
is
which is the
what
safest
I have
place.
recorded in the hallway during the loudest explosions, loudest booms and sirens of how I felt during the attack and what it meant. Hopefully you can hear.
So I'm in the hallway right now, which is the safest place because there are no windows. There are also no lights. We don't know how long they will be out, but that's the reality of reading the messages about where rockets are flying and waiting for electricity to be back on and thinking, do you need to go to a shelter across the street in the basement garage of this big store, or do you stay in your hallway? Or do you ignore this and make yourself some coffee? Real life.
So these are the kind of things that just sort of was unexpected. And of course, when there were more booms and sounds, Ukrainians now can judge how far away they are. I couldn't. And then my dad tells me, well, this room is safer. It has only one window. The other one has 2 windows on 2 sides. So if there's an explosion, something will happen. You'll have less glass flying. This is during the time when there was an outage during the day, and there were sirens and alerts and messages. And my dad and I started looking at pictures of his visit to New York City. So looking at photos of my own kids as we're sitting there during rocket attacks, that was kind of a surreal. I actually messaged my husband on cell phone, texted him, and I said, don't worry, everything's fine. He didn't even know that there was an attack. So whenever something's going on in Ukraine, we don't necessarily hear about it very quickly here, right? So for in news cycle later on. So after a few hours of power outages, I got myself up. I'm like, well, you got to get something done, right? You're not just going to sit at home and think about this. So I went to visit that lady, Alaska, in the hospital. And another sort of hard thing to do. Got flowers on the way. And I went to this very fancy, actually. This is a private hospital. Of course, walking the stairs, elevators are a little unsafe. And it's a beautiful hospital, as you can see, very modern. Friends help to raise money. If you don't have private funds, you wouldn't be able to stay in a beautiful place like this to get treatment. So that's a big problem facing Ukrainian soldiers who are wounded, is that how do you then figure out what kind of medical treatment you receive? And this is me after visiting her. Okay, I've been crying a lot, and I'm going to play the sound again because I think it just tells the story better than I can. And I just came out of visiting a friend in the hospital who is wounded and will take a few more months of rehabilitation. And I have to tell you, it is very hard to see young people full of promise dealing with something very, very, very personal and very difficult, and so much help is needed, both medical and psychological. And the silly thing was that I was the one crying my eyes out, and my friend was fine, or at least strong, much stronger. So I'm just absolutely amazed with the people of Ukraine. And afterwards, the electricity was still out. My phone wasn't working. Ukraine has Uber that I was utilizing a lot. It's very cheap there. And I couldn't, for some reason, couldn't even get phone reception, right? So when electricity is out, often it affects cell services. Sorry about that. The generators are working everywhere. Ukrainians are incredibly adept in making things work and functioning, even during the time when there are alerts and you're kind of having a hard time. So every store has a generator outside. It's a lot of noise, as you just heard me play the sound, but at least they're able to continue working. And this is a cafe that sells croissants, a famous brand. The worst thing is that when the attacks happen, you don't quite know how bad they are. This is actually a rock musician's face. I don't think it's Facebook. I think it's Instagram. But one of the ways I had learned about information there, and then of course searched for a lot more credible sources. But there were so many attacks on that day when we were sort of hiding in that hallway, or not hiding. The electricity was out for more than 12 hours, and that continued. That continued every single day. I don't want to dwell on it. I kind of want to jump through. And during that same time I'm in Ukraine, I'm getting messages from grateful friends that we help support. This is for surgical shears, special scissors that cut through everything, including blood-soaked, dried uniforms. So getting messages of help arriving as I'm in Kyiv, that was that was meaningful. And the other thing that happened is that on that same day, I had decided to go to Kharkiv. So when I was traveling to Ukraine, I promised my husband, who is born in Kharkiv, that I will not go there unless I know that it's a good idea, right? I said, I'll make that decision when I arrive. It's me and my dad in front of the main stadium in Kyiv. So as I was walking through the peaceful, beautiful Kyiv during electricity outages, just seeing the places where I was born, this is the streets very close to the building where I lived, I decided I'm going to Kharkiv. I didn't tell anyone. I texted the girl who helped me buy the tickets, train tickets, just easier if you have the apps, which I didn't. And I bought myself a ticket to go, even though Kharkiv gets bombed so much more than Kyiv. I'm like, well, you know what? If it's like this in Kyiv, what am I avoiding? How is it going to be much worse there? And This is the building where I spent first 14 years of my life. I lived on the 10th floor of the 16-story building. And that store on the left that has a green awning, that's a pharmacy now, but it used to be a dairy store. I used to get milk from there every other day. And my school is 1 block away. So seeing these places I haven't seen for 5 years, a little park where I played, this is just part of that special moments of my trip. We walked to the school. The school was beautiful, but inside the basement where we used to hang up our coats, there was a bomb shelter. And this is actually a university on that same block. I used to walk past it every day to school. Every school, every university now has a bomb shelter. It says do ukrytya, which means shelter. So every university now, to stay open, every school needs to have an underground bomb shelter, and everyone can use it during the bad attacks. So it invites, this is my school. This is the beautiful hallway. My classroom was right here at the end on the left. And on the side of the school, there was a plaque that says a gentleman used to go here who died in 2014 when Ukraine was attacked, right? Because the war that for us in the United States largely began in 2022. Actually, the aggression began, the first aggression, in 2014. So super special to see a lot of the places where I visited. Okay, vegetables in Ukraine are better than ours, I'm sorry to say, and I have an organic garden and I compost. We do all kinds of things at home, and still the vegetables were pretty amazing. Having dinner with candlelight was pretty special too, a little sad, but special. Washing dishes with a flashlight, okay, that sucked, but that's another part of life in Ukraine. The one other thing I kind of didn't expect is how close bombed out buildings were. This one was damaged by rocket fire, and it's 5-minute walk from my dad's house. You always think, oh, the capital is safe. Oh, there's most of the fighting's in the east. That's how I justify things to this day, that my dad is okay. 5 minutes away from his house, this residential building got severely damaged by debris of a rocket that was shot down over Kyiv. It probably would have been much worse if it wasn't shut down. So seeing my dad next to this building, that was another not so simple thing, right? And the interesting thing is, again, you don't think about this because I live in this beautiful neighborhood in New Jersey, but there's a section of the building completely burnt out, obviously evacuated. And I'm not going to pan to the right here, but if you see the side on the other side, there was a functioning part of the building. So in that same building, which is quite wide, one entrance has people living in it, and the other two are blocked off. And right outside, because this was a few months ago, there's still destroyed cars. And generators always working. Generator is powering up a cafe that nearby. So that's another thing. I visited a wonderful charity that I'm kind of interested, at least learning information from. This is women who are veterans. So it's actually called Veterans, but in the using feminine tense. And they are making uniforms for the military and volunteering in many ways, creating things that are missing, building things that are necessary. They actually build drones as well, but mostly they focus on uniforms and warm gear. And they share with whoever needs it, right? So a lot of them had served in 2014. Some of them are serving now. So this woman with a dog in her arms, she is you can say the director, the lady in charge. They're using some, I guess, remains of weapons to use it for plants, and they have dogs running around the office. So, they're good people. But anyway, we don't send them money, but I deal with them when we have extra funds to help more people. So they put me in touch with military medics who serve, and we're able to cooperate that way. This is a pool, a kids pool right behind this gate, and there are all these more, ways to I guess stop armored vehicles if they're trying to attack, because there's a sensitive military installation nearby. Again, it's just sort of bizarre for me to see this on the streets of Kyiv that I remember very differently. And the next morning, I had decided to go to Kharkiv, except for I couldn't get a good night's sleep. So this is it was 2 a.m. we were woken up. The sirens were much louder. So I think they may use different stations. So couldn't fall back to sleep, got a couple of hours of sleep, and then just said, okay, I guess I'm getting ready. So my t-shirt says, I may live in the United States, but my story began in Ukraine. And that's so true. So here I am with the tourniquets, and this bag now contains all the prenatal vitamins I wanted to bring. Unfortunately, it was broken and falling apart, but hey, we made it. The one thing I didn't realize is that when electricity is out, when there's a siren, elevators and escalators do not work. So the tricky part was carrying 120 pounds in those two bags up and down the stairs. So weightlifting, check, done that in Ukraine. I took the train. It was the best train I think I've ever been on. Look how gorgeous. Very modern. And Kharkiv, when I got there, was probably the safest, most beautiful place. It's #2 big city in Ukraine. It has millions of people. The moment I arrive, it says alert is canceled, right? It's even though the top says emergency alert extreme, the bottom in Ukrainian says alert is now canceled. So this is how Kharkiv had met me. And the next 7 hours were absolutely. I was met by the chief of the maternity hospital that we help on the train station. And she drove me around the center just to show the old it's the old city of Kharkiv. And unfortunately, there were a lot of windows that were covered up. So Kharkiv gets 10 times, 20 times more attacks than other cities because it's really close to the Russian border. So more rockets, more drones can just physically reach it. So many, many, many buildings, you can look at every single building will have windows that are covered up. Sometimes all the windows, sometimes a few. The streets are immaculately clean, but there's always going to be a reminder that this is a city at war. I spent a few hours in the maternity ward, and it was amazing to meet the nurses and the doctors to whom I addressed packages. And then I met Julia, that medic that we had talked about. So I'm going to just quickly scroll through these pictures since we are running out of time. But the chief doctor is an incredibly well-decorated and distinguished lady. And she took us around the building. This is a generator that we helped to buy. There's a lot of different surgical supplies. It all began with prenatal beds that we bought with the first money. We replaced one. This is actually the lamp. One of our friends, Volinsky family, had donated money from their anniversary, and we helped to buy the lamp, which was damaged by some structural damage. And then, of course, meeting the people. This was amazing. They're like, oh my God, I'm still wearing the socks you guys sent, or we love that hand cream, or whatever. Those little things, but they're really not little. That's how it all began with this maternity ward. We bought these little beds to carry newborns or to, have them next to the moms. Very emotional. And then we drove through the outskirts to undisclosed location. The military medics often don't live at the base. It would be too easy to hit the base, right? So they live in apartment buildings, in regular apartments, 4 or 5 people, 3 people per apartment, and you can see how many windows are covered up from the damage. And this is Julia and Zhenya, the guy on the picture that I showed earlier, receiving the tourniquets, right? These devices that help stop the blood flow. It was very special. They do have a beautiful dog living with them, but this is where they sleep, right? It's just a mattress on the floor. Each one has a little space. They're trying to create some version of privacy, but it's not easy. Julia, as I mentioned, is a fashion designer. She had lost a dear friend a few months ago, but she showed me how she's finally started sketching again. And this is actually a sketchbook we sent to her as a little present, just to, again, to distract people. It really meant a lot. This guy's name, I actually don't know his real name. I know only their military names. His military name is Bold, the Bold dude. And that's, again, Zhenya and Julia. They took me to the train station, and off I went. This is Miss Larisa Grigorievna Nazarenko. She is the chief doctor of the maternity ward. And the next day after I left, Kharkiv got ferociously bombed, and the cafe where we sat was bombed as well, about 100 yards from where we were. So trips like this, certainly will not be forgotten. Shook me up emotionally. I was spent 2 days in Poland afterwards. It was a complete mess. I didn't know how to come home. I felt so guilty. How do I get to come home? Why do I get to have air conditioning and central air? I came back feeling incredibly patriotic. No matter what you think about the elections or things that may be wrong, or education needs improvement, whatever is wrong with you name it, we are incredibly lucky. I am so incredibly lucky to live in New Jersey in the United States. My kids are so lucky to get, amazing education, because there's still millions, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who are either on remote learning in both universities and schools, because schools don't have bomb shelters or something else, or the areas are unsafe. So these are the things that motivate me to keep on going. So I've rambled on. Thank you so much for listening. And I know that maybe there are some questions that we have left time for.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hard to find words for what we heard. Is probably the most amazing and lucid account that we have heard in more than 2 years on this weekly program. Dr. Leonard Deutsch, our former graduate dean of Marshall University. Please, Len.
Some interrelated questions here. How much does a medical kit cost? Does it remain a high priority, or are there other higher priorities? And on your website, the URL that you printed, do you take Venmo there?
Well, first of all, the medical kits vary, just like any medical aid varies, right? Like if you buy, I don't know, a pot, right? There is all clad pot, which can cost $300, or you can get like a $20 version from Home Goods. The same thing goes, unfortunately, for medicine. So medical kit that's made in China will have everything, and it will be $55. Problem is, Chinese made medical aid that we had initially sent is not as dependable. And we learned that it's American made. For example, a company that we deal with is called North America Rescue, that makes tourniquets, bandages, gauze, plasters. So basically, we don't even send full kits anymore, because they're not as important in the huge number of little things that they carry. We now only purchase things from this company, North America Rescue, which we know is certified, guaranteed, easiest to use, unfortunately, because as I had learned, if you injured in one of your arms, you only can operate with one to apply a tourniquet. So having a tourniquet that's the easiest to use will be a difference between losing a limb and keeping a limb. And how much they cost? Well, one tourniquet costs $23. Hemostatic gauze that is packed inside the wound, $20. A chest plaster, if you have a lung wound, right, on each side, a plaster is put on. Those are $12. This is include, we have a 20% humanitarian discount, and we buy it tax-free, and so on and so on. So basically, we don't send an individual kit for one soldier. We buy a volume that we can afford in the things that are needed. And I can tell you, because I talk to these guys directly, not often, not often, they always vary what they need. For example, one unit says, we don't need tourniquets. You guys provided enough, but we are desperate for plasters. Those, they're called occlusive chest plasters. And the other one will say, we only need tourniquets. So we only ship very targeted amount. And I always say, how much do you need? Right? And say, well, how much can you give? I'm like, no, how much do you need? So there's constant communication back and forth. Another unit says, we have all the tech medicine, but we need a mannequin to train people how to apply these tourniquets, because they're in great need of new medics. They're signing up, but how do they learn? He says, we learn, this was a crazy message. She says, we learned how to apply IVs on ourselves. So they literally use their own bodies to train to do certain things. But he said, if there is blood gushing out, I need the medic to learn how to apply. And actually, I didn't show these pictures. I just received them yesterday. That was another incredible thing. These new guys are applying a tourniquet, blood, this training version of blood is gushing, and they're cursing all over that video. Like, oh my goodness, I can't post this. So that's, I guess, the short, rather long answer to your question is that the kits we don't sell, we buy individual things. And do we take Venmo? Yes. When you, my husband is IT whiz, I'm very blessed. He fixes everything around the house, including computers, and he built a website. And when you sign up, if someone can donate, there's an option to send PayPal, Venmo, using credit card, Zelle, pretty much anything.
I take it that you would prefer to goods, you would prefer a monetary donation.
Actually, I don't even, personally, I don't have a preference. I prefer anything, like send us a postcard to our, the address on our website is my home address. Send us a postcard, it costs, what, $42? Oh, sorry, 42 cents, or however, 50 cents to send a card. We would love to forward cards. They matter just as much as anything financial. I have a wonderful friend, Mr. Anthony Harkin. Never met him face to face. He found me because of just how much I posted on social media. He buys and sends to me used army clothes, right? The fatigues, boots. Great. I don't need the money. Like, I don't usually even ask people for money. And more friends in New Jersey, they bring over and drop off adult diapers. We send them to one of the hospitals where wounded soldiers are treated. So it's not about the money, it's about like doing something. This is pretty much why we started. We had to do something. I can't just write a check and send it to someone. To me, it wasn't enough. I had to physically pack, physically talk to these people, and fall asleep at the end of the day, because that was hard in the beginning. Not much easier now, but at least we're able to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. More questions and comments, please, from Anara, please.
I really appreciate your presentation, because you talked as a brilliant journalist, as also as actually a non-profit worker and organizer. That's why I think your recommendations might be very, very valuable for other people, and who would like actually discuss this issue or just would like to help. And I just have this question: what would be your strategic and practical recommendations for the aid organizations, for the aid programs here in America and in Ukraine, and in other one as a journalist, what kind of recommendations might be for the other journalists and other nonprofit experts, how we can discuss situation in Ukraine? and also the future of Ukraine, how we can actually help Ukraine, because you see that it's a huge topic, so many aspects, and I would appreciate if you can share your insights.
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble because I'm going to say things that may not be popular. Well, those are all great issues to raise. I'm not a big fan of anything huge. I'm a big fan of small and targeted, which is why we got involved in nonprofit work in the first place. Never done it before this. I am always a little suspicious of anything that is convoluted and that has warehouses and a lot of people kind of working in Ukraine, because to be quite honest, Eastern Europe in general and Ukraine in particular has always had corruption issues. The life there has never been easy, and there was always was a machine, bureaucratic machine that continued feeding into the system of corruption. So when people in Ukraine ask me for money, I say, I'm sorry, we're not able to provide. And that actually did become our philosophical sort of position, is that we only help with physical needs. I have had a woman last week who said, my dad needs tourniquets. Can you please send me some? And I said, sure. Get me a phone number for your dad. She said her dad was serving. I'll deal with him directly. I don't know that woman. I don't know who she is. My heart bleeds for everyone, but I also know that it's just not possible to verify everything. So my personal position is that we deal directly with people who serve. They say, if they're new to my life, if I don't know them yet very well, they actually send a copy of what they call military ID, which sounds ridiculous. Who am I to check anyone's military ID? But it creates the system of them at least knowing we're not just blindly sending, huge amounts of money. I've had to turn down requests for certain things that seemed important because I can't fix all the world problems. I'm not trying to. There's so many issues. So we had to become the slightly focused on what can we do. We can support the mental state by organizing small present drives. We can help during the cold times. We can organize concerts. We can buy medical aid and send it only to doctors, not to volunteers there that don't know where the aid going to. So that's my personal position. Are huge charities effective in many ways? Absolutely. There are wonderful charities that do huge things that I couldn't possibly, but they do have a lot of bureaucracy, and they do have money they spend on advertising and marketing and accounting. We don't. So that became my thing. So even though I think there's a place for everyone and for many different levels of nonprofit work, my personal comfort level is only doing things that I personally can say, I know who this person is. I know who received this aid, and then I can also sleep at night when John says we're going to send you money or we'll buy tourniquets for $3,000. So I don't feel like, oh my God, is that going to happen? Is the money going to get misappropriated? No, it won't. So that's my thing. As far as how to help, you had many other follow-up issues there. I almost feel like whenever there is a war conflict, like think of it in Sudan, in other countries, it's so complex, it's so difficult sometimes to grasp, that breaking it down and dealing with one issue at a time may be just something that we as humans can handle a little better psychologically. Because when it's something huge like, oh, war in Sudan, like, well, it's too far away, it's too huge, I don't know who the players, I'm not going to get involved. But if you say, okay, I'm only going to help catch shelter in Ukraine, okay, that's simple, right? That seems easier. So I think anytime you have a huge, overwhelming issue, breaking it down and saying, well, I only want to help these people, or I only want to help with this kind of support, then it makes easier to cover the story and also easier to feel like you made a difference. So that's why I always get away from the global and complicated and try to say, okay, what can I do today? Today I can send this. Today I can send sterile gloves to doctors, right? So they don't have to spend their budget on the gloves, which I get for free. All I have to do is find $50 to ship them. So that's how I get through my day.
Okay, thank you very much for your brilliant answer. Mhm.
Thank you, Anara. And we definitely need to give word to John Yeager, because it was because of John we learned of Anastasia, and they have been working together for a while. Please, John.
Well, I'm just incredibly grateful to Rita Taluk, who is our landlord here, Ukrainian. They live in Denver, who shared your name with us. And because we were uh, looking for partners, and you've definitely been a not only effective but inspirational partner as well. We, as you know, I felt like I was with you when on your trip, because we were trying to coordinate that with a reporter here in West Virginia, and so we were back and forth, and I was feeling a lot of your feelings. I just want to just mention a few things really quickly. We're starting to get international, just like this, an international recognition. Awareness means resources to us. Uh, just so people know, Anastasia was on Voice of America. Was it October 18th, I believe, was the date. So that's, you can't get any more worldwide than that. And a group in Ukraine is doing a documentary on Cuba and Alaska. They were recently funded by, I guess, what we would call NPR, the state media. So we're looking forward to that. And we're making progress here with our movie or our documentary As the Sunflower Whispers. That will be available perhaps in mid-February. And Victor, we need to get this interview with Anastasia to Samuel, if you can arrange that, because like you said, this was very, very effective. And then finally, of course,
Sure. Yes, I'm sure.
we're just just a quick sidebar. Larry came up with the idea of doing our premiere on February 24th, or maybe 2 day or the 22nd, sometime in February. Maybe one viewing at Marshall and one at First Pres. I won't get into the details on that, but God bless you for what you're doing, Anastasia. We are definitely inspired and grateful for being partners with you, and uh, pray God that we continue to raise funds. Our Taste of Ukraine raised over $4,000, which was held on August 24th, the day you were in Ukraine. We don't have a lot of activities between now and the end of the year. We will be participating in something called Cozy Christmas at Alchemy Theater. But again, thank you.
Thank you. It's amazing to find when people find you from far away and come into your life. And this has happened to me a few times since the war began. It really changes how you look at humanity, right? And we get so wrapped up. Like, I have two teenagers. They keep me so busy. I have actually a job. I teach history, right? I teach yoga classes. But the work to help Ukraine brought amazing new people into my life. And it just shows you sometimes opening the doors, to new things, to new people. That's what kind of makes your life richer and more fulfilling. So thank you, John and Victor and everyone else. Really, really appreciate when people want to know a little more.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Your contribution is amazing, and we are very proud to air it here. You're a professional, and in many more ways than people can be. It's amazing, and I know there is at least one of my friends watching from Kyiv right now, live, and I hope that
Доброго вечора.
and I hope that it will be watched by many. Please disseminate the recording, and we will do the same. And again, we will be happy to include a fragment into upcoming documentary, if you do
Thank
not
you so
mind.
much. No, I don't mind,
That
and I'm humbled, honestly.
was
You're too nice. Thank you.
another project. There are many. And again, thank you, and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Have a good night, everyone. Good day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much.